Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha. Welcome to Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam episode number 80. Thirukkolur Penpillai has dived into the vast ocean of spirituality and has handpicked pearls of wisdom which she put together in her Bhakti Rahasyams. Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam, a great literature which acts as a practical guide for us in our day-to-day lives. If we were able to follow most of these positive messages which Thirukkolur Penpillai gave out of her 81 pearls of wisdom, we can definitely experience a positive change in our day-to-day lives. It all talks about having a positive attitude, having the attitude of service, being devoted to God, and having a different perspective, looking at a situation or a person from a positive point of view. So, such things, if we also follow in our day-to-day lives, or we at least attempt to follow those positive traits, it definitely will be a step further to move towards spirituality. Now, in her 80th Bhakti Rahasyam, Thirukkolur Penpillai is talking about Parasara Bhattar. Now, this is the only case in Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam where she is talking about the same person for the second time, although definitely in a different incident. We saw Parasara Bhattar just 2 episodes back in the 78th Bhakti Rahasyam as a small kid who demonstrated extraordinary oratory skills to defeat a scholar who was just boasting about himself in Srirangam, just by asking a simple question of how much mud was there in his hand. The little Parasara Bhattar had stumped the so-called great scholar. Now here in this Bhakti Rahasyam, Thirukkolur Penpillai is talking about a grown-up Parasara Bhattar. Her Bhakti Rahasyam number 80 is, did I show my shoulder? Did I show my other shoulder like Parasara Bhattar? Now let's see this interesting incident and again one of the greatest qualities demonstrated by Parasara Bhattar. It was a time in Srirangam when the temple festivals were in full celebration. Again, in our past Bhakti Rahasyams, we have spoken a lot about temple celebrations, the festival time where the deity comes out of the temple, not the main deity situated in the main portion of the temple called the Garbhagriha, but there are festival deities who come out of the temple at particular times and they give darshan to one and all in the particular locality or the particular area. So what happens at those times? There are huge crowds of people who swarm to take darshan of the Lord. They have pure intentions of having the best darshan of the Lord. They want all for themselves. They want some time to see the Lord. Yet the inevitable problem it creates is from a crowd management perspective, because there are a set of people who have organized the temple fair and festival. They have to ensure that the Lord's procession moves on. The Lord is generally he comes on a chariot, so there are people to pull the chariot. So there will be crowds of people all around, in the front, in the back, sideways. So their objective is to have a vision of the Lord. Now, to control the crowds, many times there are many measures which are taken. So one of the measures which people usually take is to have a huge belt, and they would just crash that belt on the ground, making a loud sound. So that was a signal to the people to move aside and let the procession pass. So in this particular instance in Sri Rangam, there was a temple festival which was going on, and as usual people were crowding to see the Lord. Now it also happens that when the belt is swung, then after it makes the sound, the person or the volunteer who is doing this particular service, he takes back the belt to come back to his original position. Just because of the weight of the belt, it is possible that it could move a bit sideways, and if there it could strike people accidentally. So that's why a lot of times many people, just at the mere sight of that person with the belt, they would move aside in order to avoid any accidental injuries. In this instance, Parasara Bhattar was standing in a crowd waiting for the darshan of the Lord, and when the chariot came nearby, he was in deep devotion and he was praying to the Lord. And by that time, this person performing the crowd dispersal services, he had come and he struck his belt to the ground. And when he pulled that belt up, again accidentally it hit Parasara Bhattar on one of his shoulders. That's when Parasara Bhattar came out of his devotional trance. He realized, so this was a crowd management service going on, so he just smiled at the person who had hit the belt to the ground, and he walked away praying to the Lord. Now some of his disciples saw this particular incident and they couldn't keep quiet. They rushed to the person who was doing this crowd management service, and they started fighting with him that how can you even dare to touch our spiritual master Parasara Bhattar. Now for this person, he was doing his duty sincerely. He did not know that the person who was praying, was he Parasara Bhattar or was he someone else, or even who was Parasara Bhattar, that person may not be aware of. So he didn't do this intentionally. He also started arguing in a similar fashion, but the disciples' number was more and the situation could have turned ugly if not someone carried this news to Parasara Bhattar. So Parasara Bhattar came running. He first separated the crowd of his disciples and the person who was doing this service, crowd dispersal service. So he told his disciples that nobody should even dare to touch or argue with that crowd services person, because he was doing his service for the Lord. Parasara Bhattar was standing there. It was his own fault that he did not move. And again, the beautiful thing with which Parasara Bhattar said was, this devotional service of spreading the crowds across or managing the crowd is also conferred by the Lord himself. If the Lord wishes, then only a particular person gets to do this kind of a devotional service. This person was doing it with full devotion, so he is liked by the Lord. Secondly, the belt which he was using to crash on the ground and making the sound, that also has the sanction of the Lord. So the Lord likes the belt also. So if these two things which are liked by the Lord, it touched him on one of the shoulders. In fact, he was unfortunate that he didn't show the other shoulder at that time. The moment when at that time when the belt had hit one part of his one shoulder, he laments he should have showed the other shoulder also, so that he could be blessed by that beating from the Lord's favorite things and person. That is, the Lord liked the belt and the Lord liked the person who was rendering devotional service. If both being dear to the Lord, if those things touch him, it was going to be his great fortune. Now, hearing this again, these words couldn't have come unless Parasara Bhattar was deep into devotion for the Lord, as well as he recognized the service which the person was performing. So he feels that this person had done no wrong, and it was indeed Parasara Bhattar admitted his fault, and he felt that he should have shown his other shoulder. So this is what Thirukkolur Penpillai is referencing and saying, did I show my other shoulder like Parasara Bhattar? Now, hearing this, the person who was doing this crowd management services, he fell at the feet of Parasara Bhattar. He apologized, though Parasara Bhattar was always of the opinion that this person had done no wrong. The disciples also realized their folly, and in this, Parasara Bhattar gave a great lesson on A, devotion, and B, humility. And this is what Thirukkolur Penpillai is referencing when she says, did I show my other shoulder like Parasara Bhattar? Imagine if we were in such a situation, what would we have done? We would immediately go, we ourselves would go and fight with that person. How dare you hit me? And if there are people to support, God save that person. So, in spite of not realizing that we may be at fault at that point in time, and the person was just doing his sincere duties, why go to that extent of imagining about a person hitting the belt to the ground and that belt hitting us? Let's take a very simple example of we being in a crowded temple, and just to manage the crowd, there are volunteers who are just pushing people immediately. The moment we see the Lord, there are people volunteers who push us away. It happens very commonly in Tirumala temple of Lord Balaji. We get Lord Balaji's darshan for a single second, the people push us. The moment we come out of the temple, instead of cherishing or relishing that one single second we got to see Lord Balaji, our mind is always on the people who pushed us. We say, these people can't even let us to stay even for an extra second. Imagine, those people are managing lakhs and lakhs of people every day, and what a nightmare it would be for them. Yet they do those activities as a service to the Lord. It's not for their personal benefit they are pushing us. Yet we feel that way, and see how Parasara Bhattar dealt with that situation. So it's all about devotion and humility, and having that maturity to recognize what the other person is doing. That is the key message out of this particular Bhakti Rahasyam. So in future, whenever we are in such a situation where we are in a crowded space and there are volunteers who are trying to manage the crowds, will we remember this episode, and will we be not rude to them and come out and complain or just gossip about them? If we are able to do that, we have crossed a particular stage, or we have reached a particular maturity in our life. Again, baby steps to get into that spiritual path. So that is what Parasara Bhattar is teaching us out of this particular incident. And again, thanks to Thirukkolur Penpillai, who handpicked this particular wisdom, pearl of wisdom, and with that she is trying to give us this message of being humble, being polite, being devoted in whatever we do in our lives. So it's not only towards, we don't want to restrict this message only to volunteers who are doing sevas or services in the temple. It can be towards anyone with whom we deal in our day-to-day lives. Everyone has a role to play, has a duty to discharge, and that person may be in a different set of mind depending on what are the circumstances or situations or events going on in his or her life. So that decides the reaction in a particular situation. So if we are a bit cognizant about that, a bit mature to understand what the other person is going through, and we are able to control our reactions and responses, this Bhakti Rahasyam 80 is teaching us to at least go towards that path of controlling our reactions, controlling our responses, and evolving in our spiritual path. So that was our Bhakti Rahasyam number 80. Stay blessed, stay devoted, and stay tuned for our last Bhakti Rahasyam number 81. Radhe Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Shrimate Ramanujaya Namaha.